Okay, well, welcome everybody to Solar Noon Tuesday. I'm Jay Warmke with solarpvtraining.com. And if you're new to this format, what we're going to be doing here is we go through sort of in three stages. We'll do the what's happening in the wonderful world of solar, in the last week or so. Do a 10-minute recap on that or whatever. Then highlight whatever webinars are coming up or conferences that are in the next month or so. And then we go into a deep dive on a subject that's of interest within the solar industry. We do these every Tuesday at noon, and we do have folks online here with us. So hopefully it becomes an interactive event. But if you're watching this on YouTube or whatever, then you're not going to be interacting with us live. You may try, but it'll be a one-sided conversation, I'm afraid. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the news of the week. It's May 11th, the week of May 11th. And actually, this just in. I was actually just a few moments ago, got this come up on my feed here, and it appears that in the budget reconciliation process, the House and Senate, I guess it's probably still the House, is planning on eliminating the residential in the investment tax credit. So basically, the 30% tax credit that you can get on the installation of solar on residential homes out the window under the current process. In fact, this was sort of a recap from Solar Power World. So I haven't looked at this very deeply because, like I said, I just saw this about 15 minutes ago. But the plan is eliminating the residential ITC after this year, after 2025, eliminating all of the EV credits, all of those tax credits. They seem hell-bent on not liking electric vehicles, and then preserving the ITC and the PTC, that's the production tax credit, for larger scale systems. And it wasn't super clear what they mean by larger, whether it's all commercial or systems over a certain size. Maybe people online know more about this, but through 2028 and then phasing it down. I believe the last one, this is accelerating the phase down, if I'm not mistaken. It seemed to me it was like into the 30s anyway, before we started phasing down before. Replacing start of construction with placed in service before you can collect the tax credit. That can be a big deal, I'm sure, on multi-year projects. Another big deal, eliminating transferability of these tax credits. That's huge for a lot of these larger system developers. But they are talking about preserving the IRA adders for low income and energy communities. So again, that's something that only applies to commercial installations. And for instance, the energy community, I always think of that as the Joe Manchin provision. So any area that relied on fossil fuels or had a coal power plant shut down, or a area adjacent to one that had it shut down. Anyway, they get a 10% rider on their tax credit on that. And I guess that's pretty much, yeah, those were the big things. Okay, so anybody have a comment on that may know more about that than I do? Anyone online who cares to? Yeah, that's something that'll be a big news. I don't want to get too worked up about it yet. These things that's the first volley. Then we'll see what happens in negotiation. There seems to be a lot of this in this administration of making these controversial announcements and then backing down. So we'll see. The electrification of heating systems and the adoption of electric vehicles are expected to raise New England's annual electricity consumption by over 11% over the next decade, according to the region's grid operator. The net annual energy usage in this region has trended down for the last couple of decades, mainly due to an increase in energy efficiency from advanced cooling and heating technologies, energy efficient appliances and lighting, and increased number of homes and businesses that are putting solar on their rooftop. That, of course, reduces grid demand. However, ISO New England is predicting that this trend will reverse over the next decade. We've seen this for a long time where we had a rise in electrical demand, then it flattened out for about 2 decades here, and now we're seeing a rise again. The report indicates that net annual energy across the region is expected to grow about 1.2% through 2040 per year. And that solar will not be enough to offset that, or on the home or business solar will not. Behind the meter solar is expected to reduce consumption supply by 2034 by about 11,000 gigawatt hours each year. But at the same time, increase from electric vehicles and heating electrification, just to name two sources, is going to add about 17,000 gigawatts at the end of those 10 years. And while this is an article about New England, I think we're seeing the same situation, or even more so, across the rest of the country. One major reason for the grid not facing increased demand over the past several decades is suddenly in peril. The Energy Star program that helped consumers save about $500 billion in energy costs and around 5 trillion kilowatt hours since it was launched in 1992 under President George H.W. Bush. Now, despite these impressive numbers, the Environmental Protection Agency recently hinted that it plans to end the program, this according to reports from CNN, The Washington Post, and Reuters. Last week, it was reported that the Trump administration was planning to scrap the Energy Star program as part of its reorganization of the EPA. According to people who attended the briefing on this matter, the administration is planning on eliminating the entire Office of Atmospheric Protection, which administers the Energy Star program, along with some other programs. The EPA has neither confirmed or denied these I was going to say accusations, but I don't know if that's the right word. In April, more than 1,000 companies and organizations lobbied the EPA to maintain the program. Now, they represent, or they claim, of course, that a typical household can save about $450 in energy costs each year by choosing Energy Star programs. The program has more than 16,000 participating companies and organizations, including about 1,800 manufacturers who rely on this Energy Star program to promote energy efficiency and, of course, drive demand for their products. Restrictions on wind and solar development in Texas could increase wholesale power prices by 14% over the next 10 years and cause capacity shortfalls. According to a recent analysis by Aurora Energy Research, they outlined this in a report that they prepared for the Texas Association of Business. A typical Texas household's electricity costs would increase around $225 per year, or about 10%, according to the report. Now, this is in response to recent legislation working its way through the Texas legislature. In the past few weeks, the state Senate passed one bill that imposed new fees and regulatory requirements on wind and solar developments. Another bill that said for every megawatt hour of solar or wind that was added to the grid, it had to be matched with a megawatt hour of power coming from gas or coal. And now there's a third bill that's under consideration at the moment, not yet passed, that said retroactively they want to require all wind and solar generating facilities to have what they're referring to as firm backup generation in place, which is effectively a diesel or a natural gas generating plant that matches the output capacity of the wind and solar facility in case that facility goes down. All right, so who knows where the logic is on that. The pushback from the fossil fuel industry is in response to changing marketplace, where last year nationwide, only 4% of all new electric utility generating capacity was generated by fossil fuels. Speaking of the free market, on May 1st, 38 House Republicans sent a letter to the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee asking for full repeal of the Inflation Reduction Act during budget reconciliation processes. The signers asserted that the IRA will cost taxpayers $1 trillion over the next decade and will jeopardize America's return to energy dominance. The opponents of the IRA assert that it unfairly props up unreliable energy sources such as wind and solar, while displacing dependable and proven energy sources like coal and gas, and refer to the IRA as the left's green welfare agenda. Meanwhile, the Business Council of Sustainable Energy and the Clean Energy Business Network urged Congress to support the full suite of existing energy tax incentives. Signatories represent business interests in 43 states, with companies that signed the letter supporting the IRA represent about $451 billion in capital, as well as 165,000 employees. They claim that the IRA has stimulated the U.S. economy, particularly in the clean energy sector, creating more than 400,000 jobs, and are directly responsible for billions of dollars in private investment. Well, that story seems a little bit old, given what the first one that we just gave, which was, it sounds like the compromise in these negotiations was, let's get rid of half of the IRA. So, anyway, any questions or any comments from the group that's online at the moment on what's happening in the wonderful, wacky world of solar? I feel like I'm in the sequence of Star Wars where the Empire Strikes Back. You know, we all had that march with victory, and now they're coming for us. So, but we all know it. As Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they attack you, and then you win. All right. So
Well, you're out of touch there, Jay. It's Andor now. You should be watching that one.
oh, okay. All right. Well, the battle never ends then, apparently. So yeah, I'm obviously showing that I'm still living in the 70s here. So all right. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get into the announcements. If anyone has any comments, I welcome those. On May 7th, we have one of these series from Renvu. And these sessions from Renvu are always just, they're basically blatant commercials. They're product promotion, but I found them to be very helpful, especially if you're interested in that product. You get a good representative from that company telling you all of the benefits of their product. So there's one on GrowWatt, 1 p.m. on May 7th. Oops, May 7th. Huh, that's already passed. Too late. I thought I had gotten rid of those. Okay, let's jump up to May 15th. Power plant transitions at noon. This obviously more at the utility scale. AI and solar. The suggestion was just made previously that we start looking at AI and how it's affecting our marketplace. Well, there's a webinar coming up on the 15th about where are we going with solar, with AI and solar. Then May 19th and 22nd, this is a face-to-face conference in Phoenix, Arizona, Clean Power. And then we have data center energy procurement on the 21st, 10 a.m., coming from S&P Global. Solar United Neighbors, this is a nice group of folks who get together promoting primarily at residential level. It's almost like think of it as a advocate buyers club kind of thing where you can come in and get lower prices because you're doing group purchases. But they're having this thing more and more often now. It's just a coffee chat. So feel free to register. Go online on the 21st from 12:30 to 1:30. All of these times are Eastern. Then we have Fortress Power, another one from Renvu at 1 p.m. on the 21st. And then Solar United Neighbors is going to have a session about battery storage and resilience. This is on the 21st at 2 p.m. Field inspections, how to avoid costly mistakes, May 29th at noon. And then June 3rd, residential solar sales tips. This is coming from Solar Power World. And then I found this one interesting. I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with 800 volt systems, but 600 volt AC versus 800 volt AC optimizing string inverter systems on June 5th. And then there's the Midwest Solar Expo on June 9th through the 11th. And then our shameless plug on solarpvtraining.com if for our face-to-face as well as our virtual or self-paced training courses. That's all there. All right, so that's what came across my desk. Does anybody have anything they would like to add to the discussion here. Give you just a second. Okay, well, hopefully we'll get some feedback when we jump into the deep dive here, which is on latest solar prices and market trends. Every year. Oh, before I get into that, let me just mention that these sessions have already been approved for ETA CEUs if you're certified with ETA for the solar. And I guess the way you would have to do this, just to clarify that a bit, is go into solarpvtraining.com under the Solar Noon Tuesday tab. And if you've attended it live, you just click on that. It'll bring up the course. You can print out a certificate and then submit that to ETA. Or if you're watching this on video, you can do the same thing, access that video through the solarpvtraining.com website. All right, so jumping into the marketplace report, every year or every really 6 months, EnergySage comes out with a state of the market kind of report, and these things have been quite helpful. This is the 20th, and it was just recently published this week or last week, giving all of the updates. Really, it is helpful to see as a snapshot in time what's going on with prices and products and things of that nature. But one of the things I found very helpful is to see trends over the years, because this is the 20th. You can compare how this industry has been developing every 6 months. They take a snapshot of it, and you can see prices going down or prices going up, what companies are ahead, what companies are falling behind. So very helpful. So let's sort of take a look, and I will encourage the folks who are online to jump in at any point if you've got a question or a comment. But we'll just sort of recap the macro takeaways from this report. And the first one is prices are coming down. The prices are way down, actually. It's the lowest cost of solar ever. So the median cost that they're saying is about $2.50 a watt. That's the for no batteries, right? Grid tied system, no batteries. So even the cost though of solar plus storage is coming down fairly significantly. We'll get into that a little bit deeper. And then, as I mentioned, you can see the cost of storage per kilowatt hour has actually cracked the $1,000. This is the retail price. So you can see just in the last, 2 years, down 40%. I mean, almost 40%. That's pretty remarkable in the cost of storage there. Okay, and one of the reasons for that is Tesla. Tesla has become a market disruptor in the world of storage, and primarily by cutting costs. So that's one of the takeaways of this over the last year. And bear in mind, all of these numbers are for the complete year of 2024. We really don't have numbers more recent than that. Fair enough. And the other thing, another macro takeaway is that panels are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Both physically in size, but also in the amount of watts that they're generating. Nothing really unusual about seeing a 600 watt panel anymore. I saw when I was looking at this 690 watt panels. And I know that I've got a number here later on, but basically it was like 97% of all installs put in panels greater than 400 watts. Well, just a couple of years ago, 400 watts was considered huge. Now it's just considered average. So, all right. Okay, so I'll give you guys an opportunity. Any comments at this stage as I ramble on? I know I keep touching base with you. Everybody's feeling very observatory at the moment. Well, let's look at the price. So as I mentioned, the price on this is the median price is going to be about $2.50. Now, the $2.50 per watt, this is an installed pre incentive cost. And again, that's a median cost. And this graph shows that essentially it'll go all the way from, I'd say the low end there on the graph is about $1.75 a watt, all the way up to about $4.25 a watt. It shows $1.50, but there's almost nothing there. So the bulk of them are going to be in the, oh, realistically, $2 to $2 to $3. That's going to be 90% of that range, just looking at that. And that's probably pretty fair. At least in my experience, and of course, we're going to see that geography plays a role in this, where you are located in the country. And then it's showing that payback on average 7.5 years, and system size 10.9 kilowatts. So those are the averages. I would have to assume, and it didn't really say, but I would have to assume that 7.5 years is after you've factored in the incentives. Because I don't know, when I've done systems, for the most part, when I've done assessments, they usually come in closer to 10 years without incentives. Yeah, Al, you've got a comment?
Yeah, just a question. Is the 250 a watt just to install the solar panels, or to including an inverter and everything else you need?
Yeah, that's all in. Not
Oh,
batteries, but
yeah.
that's racking, installation, design, permits. That's everything.
That's about what I paid in 2019.
But did you install it yourself, or did you?
No, I had an installer do it, and mine's 7.2 kilowatts. So it's probably come down since then.
Yeah, well, you got a deal then, because that's that would be, I would have thought at the time, you said 2019?
19, yeah.
Yeah. At the time, I would say the average price was going to be higher, more like $3.
Yeah, we actually formed a co-op here in Kent, Ohio, and we utilized Solar United Neighbors,
Uh-huh.
and
Right.
we got a discount, like a 15% discount, because we brought about 30 customers in.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And
Well, that's
that's one of the things that Solar United Neighbors still does.
yeah.
Still do
Yeah.
co-ops, although not as much as they used to, I don't think.
Yeah, I know they do a lot of advocacy, and their
Right.
kind of reason for being was just as you point out, they would get together, they would hold an organizational meeting in a community like you said, Kent, Ohio. And they would bring people in, and you get maybe 20, 30, 40 people who said, yeah, I would like to have solar on my home. And they'd say, okay, well, sign here and we'll go out and we'll bid these projects as a group, and we're going to get a better deal. Well, it was a good deal for the solar installer because they're getting 30 or 40 projects all at once, so they can give a better deal. And then they would buy the product in bulk. They would negotiate better with the installer, and you would end up getting a significant discount on the install. So that's a good group, good organization.
Jay,
Yeah.
Ted here. Does that $2 to $3, does that include storage, or is it just the grid tied systems?
Yeah, just the grid tied system. Yeah. Without storage. Boy, that'd be a deal if it was with storage for sure. Yeah, storage is gonna, I don't know, what, double it maybe? That would be my rough guess. Again, it depends on how much storage. We're seeing storage at $1,000 per kilowatt hour for the battery, and then whatever the install of that battery. A lot of these systems, the install of the battery is becoming kind of plug and play. You've got a smart switch there, or the inverter acts as a smart switch, and then you just take the battery system and it just plugs into the ports on that smart switch or that inverter. So there's not a huge amount, although again, placement of the battery, all of those other things. So maybe figure 50% for the install, so $1,500 a kilowatt hour would not be totally out of line on top of this cost. Yeah, normally, again, when I was first starting to teach solar, we always referred to solar costs. Basically, we're referring to the module cost. So the module was $1 a watt, or $1.50 a watt, or $2 a watt. It became where modules got so cheap. Now we talk about essentially the full installation. And this includes all the soft costs, which represent about 60% of the cost. So soft costs being everything except for the hardware. So it could be the permitting, the shipping, profits, design, installation. All of those soft costs are going to be included in there. Last year, just as a comparison, the average cost was $269. So to my calculations, that's down about a little over 7%. Again, talking about a simple grid-tied system. And this is the medium cost. I think what you'll see is the smaller the system, the higher the cost per watt. The larger the system, the lower the cost per watt. So if you're talking about a 4 or 5 kW system, you're going to be up there closer to the $3, $3.50, per watt range. If you're talking a 15 kW system or a 20 kW system, you're going to be closer down to the $2 a watt range. So, all right, now I took this note in the report to be kind of hopeful. Maybe that the consumers are becoming a bit more savvy, but it said in the first half of 2024, 60% of the shoppers did not select the low bid when they were getting quotes. So I think that's a good sign, because we all hear the horror stories, the cowboys that come into the industry, maybe low bid it, do terrible job on the installation. So hopefully people are doing due diligence, getting a few bids, and then picking the one that is coming from the most reputable, the fellow who comes in, or the company that comes in and says, listen, I'm not going to be the lowest bid, but the job's going to be right, and here are my references, and this is the way it's going to work. So I think that's just a sign of maturity within the industry. As I mentioned, all of this varies by state. And so the top 6 states for solar. So this is part of the interesting thing within these EnergySage reports, is that we see this demographic shifting or regional shifting of where things are active. So Florida is number 1, really shot past Texas and California. I think this is primarily residential. So utility scale, I think Texas is still number 1. But you can see the price per watt fairly low, $2.20. This is, again, the average. Texas, $2.10, the median price per watt for a grid-tied system. Get into California, $2.39. And then you get into Nevada, $2.18 per medium watt. New Mexico, now we're up to about $3. But New Mexico being the 5th most installed residential, and then Ohio, $2.70. Yeah, probably about right. I mean, that's my experience here in Ohio. That seems like a reasonable number, at least from what we're seeing. The average here changes. This was in last year's numbers, so as we said, it's $2.50, but this one shows lowest price Texas, Arizona, $2.10, $3.30 Rhode Island. So it varies all over the state, all over the country. You can see that the brownish going to be the cheapest, the tannish a little bit cheaper. Then you get into the dark blue, the most expensive.
Hey, Jay,
Yeah.
What do you think accounts for that large the variation? Is it the cost of labor? If you assume that the materials are approximately the same, is it, just the difficulty of doing it? Is it regulation? And what would account for the differences? That kind of difference.
It's probably a lot of things. Some of it might be, some of these states exempt it from sales tax, or right off the bat, it would save you 6-7% if you're not paying sales tax on your materials. There's labor costs for sure. The cost of inspections and permitting could be a significant thing. We see it really varied depending on the location. The worst case I've seen is on a very, very small commercial project that I was involved with. It was really just a demonstration, 6 panels on a pole. The whole install was going to be less than 10,000, but the permitting was going to be around 7,000 just for permitting by the time we got through all of the hoops. And because it was on a commercial property, they wanted a Ohio registered PE to do a structural analysis and a second one to do an electrical analysis, and then you had to pay for it. You had to pay the fees, two different inspection fees. So it was a nightmare. So that could be part of it, depending on the regulations that are in place. But it's probably a combination of a lot of different things. The variation in numbers are relatively minor, 20, 30 cents per kilowatt hour or per watt. So, it's that's my guess, but I don't have hard data on that. So ignore it. Yeah, one thing that I found interesting here is only 2 of the top 10 states had significantly higher electric prices. Now, one of the things that we've always talked about, as we're discussing solar, is one of the prime drivers is what is your electricity cost. In areas where you have high electricity, solar makes financial sense. In places where the electricity costs are very low, it doesn't make as much sense. I think what we're starting to see is that as rates across the nation go up, and we have been seeing this, and as costs of installing across the nation go down, we're hitting this sweet spot where it's less of an issue. Solar makes financial sense almost in every environment. So there are going to be other factors that contribute to the adoption. The primary driver is not going to be electric. In fact, if we look at the top 10 states for solar, Florida being number 1, the average electrical rate there in the far right-hand column was about a little over 13 cents per kilowatt hour. Texas, almost about 15 cents. California, obviously, much higher electric rate, 34 cents plus. So I think it was California and New York that they were talking about having higher rates. But even a state like Utah with 11 cents, still adopting, solar quite a lot. 11, 12, 13 cents. That's going to be on the low end, but still makes solar an effective alternative. Here, we'll also see that the size of the system, I'm less concerned about size of the systems here. My guess is a lot of that is climate driven. But really offset. Looks like people are trying to get 100% if possible. I suspect one of the drivers for those states that are less than that, when you get around 90%, that's kind of a holdover of whatever that state's, they're going to ding you for overproduction. So we've run into that before where a designer will come in and they'll just say, listen, I'm going to design this to 90%, because if you overproduce, you're not given a lot of latitude. And you don't want to fall outside of the legal production range. So if it caps at 100%, I'm going to only design to 90%. That said, it doesn't really apply here in Ohio. Ohio showed 88% there. But in the state of Ohio, we've got 120% that you can go to. So I'm not quite sure what the driver is there. Then we talk about size. As I said, I think it's more weather dependent as opposed to anything other than that. But just to say the smallest system, California, 8.3 on average kW. The largest, Kentucky, yeah, my guess that's a relatively small sample. So probably early adopters getting involved there. But the bigger systems, well, Florida, obviously air conditioning, things of that nature. So I don't know. I just threw that in there. I don't see a lot of value in worrying about what size system. This here also talking about 97% of all of the quotes have panels over 400 watts, and it shows you over time how that's shifted. Just interesting to see back in 2020, just 5 years ago, almost 70% were below 350. Now we're getting up there where, at least 70% are over, well, 97% are over 400. So, they're getting physically bigger, and they're also just generating more watts. Makes sense if you're installing these systems, because if you think about it, if you've got two 200-watt panels and one 400-watt panel, well, it takes the same amount of time really to install the 200-watt panel. It takes twice as much time because each panel takes as much time. So you got twice the labor, twice the bolts, twice the issues involved with getting it up onto the roof and all of that. The only downside is if you get them so big that it requires, extra people to manhandle them. OSHA requires that you have two people lifting if it weighs over 50 pounds. They've over historically kept these things under 50 pounds, I suspect for that reason. But I wouldn't want to manhandle a panel just with one person on a roof, regardless, even if you're legally allowed to, because those things are bulky. You don't want to be dropping them. You don't want the wind to catch it. It really takes two people, given the size of these panels. So I don't know that weight consideration, and maybe they busted through that weight. Maybe I haven't looked that closely, but that may be part of it too. Maybe they're just acknowledging these things. It takes two to get those things up there. Okay, speaking of panels, what are the popular panels? And this is one of those diagrams that I find interesting to look at over time. For instance, REC group, when you're talking about the number, the popularity, you can see that dark blue at the bottom. You can see REC has grown. It's been a dominant player for a good long while, but it's getting more popular. QCell is another very popular. In fact, between those two, between REC and QCell, that's 50% of the market right there. Panasonic used to be a dominant player. I believe I didn't look it up, but I thought they had gotten out of the panel business, but it's still showing they're selling some. So maybe that was just the remnants of Panasonic, but I thought they got out of panels. Silfab, they've been around for a while, a little less dominant than they have been. And then really everybody else is an also ran. So really QCells and REC, those are the two that are the major players. And personally, I treat solar panels relatively generically. Look for price as long as they're UL certified. As long as they're a good quality brand, have a good reputation. I don't really care one versus the other, as long as they work. But that's just my own, I guess, prejudice on that. But then, of course, inverters, that's a different matter. So interesting to see that Enphase is still the big player. I guess the trend has continued over recent years where Solar Edge, it really was for many, many years a competition between Solar Edge and Enphase. And if you go before these numbers that you're seeing here, those numbers were reversed. Solar Edge was the dominant inverter, Enphase secondary. Solar Edge started having some quality issues. The inverters themselves would fail fairly regularly. Enphase started picking up market share. Now, to be fair, before that, way back with the Enphase microinverter, the M215s, Enphase had a lot of quality issues there, a lot of failures. So I think that's why Solar Edge became dominant during that time period. But with the M250s and then the IQ series, Enphase seems to have eliminated a lot of that quality issue and have become the dominant players. And both of these companies do honor their warranties, so if one of the things fails, then they will replace it, but it's a pain, and if you're an installer, you don't want to keep rolling trucks out to replace a solar edge inverter. So eventually you just stop even suggesting it. You just say, Enphase is more reliable or whatever. Yeah, it's a little more expensive, but you won't have the problems. And you start upselling the one that's a little more reliable. And I think that's what we've seen play out here. Another big change, which was alluded to in the macro section, is Tesla. Tesla, in really just last year, starting to become a player in the inverter world. That light blue there, really outselling SolarEdge for the first time. So really now it's a battle, I would say for the most part, between Enphase, Tesla, and SolarEdge in the world of inverters. Any comments on the inverters before we move forward there? I'm trying to engage you guys here in some sort of conversation.
Hey, Jay, I did have a question. Does Enphase sell string inverters?
I don't think they do. No.
And then conversely, does SolarEdge sell microinverters?
No, they're in the world of optimizers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they have a fixed voltage string inverter. I know Enphase doesn't have a string inverter. There are other microinverters out there like Hoy Miles. They were listed there, I think. Yeah, Hoy Miles. That's becoming a competitor primarily for Enphase. I think AP Systems has both, right? String inverters and microinverters. Maybe somebody who's more familiar with AP Systems might have some feedback on that. But no, I think they're all in their lane, sort of, at least.
Yeah, I'll just give you some real world experience. Last Tuesday I had to have my SolarEdge inverter replaced for a number of reasons, but it's 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I had an LG battery, 9.8 kilowatt battery, I believe, that had to be replaced about 4 years old. So I've not had a lot of luck with my equipment.
Yeah, and I know Enphase, or not Enphase, but SolarEdge was doing a kind of a partnership with LG Chem, trying to sell those as a sort of a co-branded. And I thought that SolarEdge started marketing their own battery, but it appeared to me, and I don't have proof of this, but it appeared to me it was just an LG Chem battery with a SolarEdge label on it.
I think you're right.
Yeah, because it had all the same specs.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a shame. So it sounds like you were part of the same issue. So given that experience, though, would you have gone with a different choice if you knew then what you know now?
But the problem is back in 2019, as you pointed out, SolarEdge was the dominant player because, other ones just hadn't proven reliability yet.
Yeah.
And then it turned out that, and the other problem is, and this is a question I wanted to ask you also, with all the Chinese tariffs, and I know they're down to 30% now and supposedly all this, but are there, because my SolarEdge inverter that I just had replaced came from China. Are there companies in the US that are currently or have the ability to manufacture and sell solar panels and inverters to meet the needs of the growing market?
Yeah. Well, part of the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, was to give a 10% kicker if you manufactured the product domestically. I know both SolarEdge and Enphase announced domestic production of their inverters. Enphase, I know, has opened at least two, and I know there have been articles saying that they're shipping. I think SolarEdge, maybe they announced the same thing, whether it was just that they were going to do it or that they were shipping. So those were the two that I was familiar. I know Fronius, I think, opened up a facility for inverters here in the US, but and I'm just going by memory here, it seemed to me they canceled that, maybe not. Then a lot of solar panel manufacturers, of course, have made those announcements. So Q cells, some of these other large facilities have opened up, have said that they're shipping. There seems to be a significant disconnect between the announcements of capacity and the announcements or the actual US sales. I find when they talk about the capacity of US solar panel production is at this big number, in fact, almost enough to meet our domestic demand. But then when you drill down into other numbers in unrelated documents, they say we're still importing 87% of all of our solar panels. So those two numbers don't square in my mind. You know, if we have enough domestic capacity to meet all of our domestic demand, yet we're still importing 87%, something's not jiving there. So I'm not quite sure if the panels are just so expensive, or yeah, we've got the capacity, but they're not producing at that level of capacity, or they're going off or maybe they're being sold for export. I don't know why that would be the case, but the situation is we're still reliant. Now, you had mentioned that the Chinese tariffs are down to 30%, but I don't think any of that impacts existing tariffs. And already we're facing large tariffs. I mean, the tariffs on Chinese panels didn't go away. It's just an additional 30%. The tariffs announced on panels from Vietnam or Malaysia or Cambodia, all of those that were announced as a result of the lawsuit that just was settled, those don't go away either. So we're still facing, but all of these numbers are already factoring in significant tariffs. So even with these huge tariffs on imported panels, the price is still going down and going down. All right. Any other comments before we move on to the next one here?
Hey, this is Devanan.
Yeah, Devanan.
That data the inverters is showing us there were the different manufacturers. Those are for inverters being utilized in the US market, not globally.
Yes.
They just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, they're just US and they're just US residential. So it's not for you in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's not for the larger systems. It's not for commercial systems or utility scale systems.
You know, one last point, Jay. I did look up, and both Enphase and SolarEdge have manufacturing plants in the U.S. for panels and for inverters. But I find it ironic that the replacement inverter that I got from SolarEdge is made in China. My guess is they're going to clear out all their Chinese product before they ship any US product, but I could be wrong about that.
Well, sure. And I guess if you're giving it away, if it's part of then there's no tariff on it if you didn't charge for it, right? So that makes sense. I just found it funny when I installed my first system at our farm in 2014, and we used Enphase. And on the side of the box, it basically said in really big print, proudly designed in America. And then in really small print at the bottom, assembled in Mexico. So, you know, that's all the marketing. All right. So when we talk about some of these panels and pairing, inverters and pairing, here, a lot of these things go hand in hand. A lot of these companies are trying to create partnerships here. It was showing REC and Tesla is the low cost solution at the moment. So if you're out there speccing systems, or if you're a consumer thinking you may want to buy a residential system, this is your starting point. If you're just going for price, consider Tesla with REC panels, and that's going to be your low cost option. Then it's showing a partnership there of Enphase and M Solar. I've never heard of those panels. It's probably my own fault. But anyway, only 3.5%. So again, we're only talking about product here, and product being 40% of the cost of a system. So 3.5% of 40%, not a huge difference. Q-Cell with Tesla, another low-cost option. REC with Enphase, okay. a little bit more Silfab with Solar Edge, Q cells with Enphase. And then Panasonic, well, I don't think those are available anymore. The one that really sort of sticks out there is that pronounced Wari? I've seen that. I just haven't said it out loud. And SunPower. Yeah, SunPower is always considered sort of the premium when you're talking about these systems. So that would make sense that it's significantly more expensive, 51%.
I
So
have a
those are,
question, Jay.
yeah.
I joined this, so I came in late. Sorry about that. I had a problem with the internet. Name's Jeremy Shane from Western Maryland,
Uh-huh.
and just wanted to say, what do you think about the new Japanese solar panels that they just put out? Have you seen those?
No, I'm not familiar. Do you know the name of the panel?
I don't know the name of the panel, but I heard it puts out 70% more electricity than the other panels that we've had in last few years.
Hmm. 70% sounds high. More than probably a bit of hype. My guess is it's probably a tandem panel where you've got perovskite on top of silicon. So you've got a tandem layer, and we have seen some of those things coming onto the market. So it wouldn't surprise me that that might be the item. I think we're going to see more and more of that. The hope is that you start seeing these tandem panels that are more efficient, but that the price comes down to be competitive with the existing panels. So we saw that with PERC panels, the passive emitter rear contact, I think is the PERC acronym, where they got 2 or 3 or 4% more production and at about 1% cost. And then the costs came down. So PERC is now the standard. Saw bifacial. We're seeing split cell. We're seeing a lot of these improvements in these. And I think tandem is the next step there. Eventually, I think we're going to see the elimination of silicon altogether, and that we're going to be moving to a perovskite panel. It's just cheaper to manufacture. It's more efficient. There are some durability issues that have to be taken into consideration and overcome before it becomes maybe commercially competitive with silicon. But as we said here many times, we're in the floppy disk age of solar. Everything is evolving, everything is developing.
Yeah.
It's exciting time. But
Yeah. Another question about the batteries, the lithium batteries and the iron phosphate. Now, have you heard anything about those way to anything new about that those types of batteries there?
yeah, the ones I hear mostly from people who are in the know, who get excited about this stuff, is sodium batteries. They're always saying sodium's going to be the next big thing. Sometimes you'll hear solid state batteries are going to be the next big thing. Lithium, I think we've always considered it to be a bridge technology. I think that bridge is going to be with us for a while because, it's getting cheaper and cheaper. And you need to have a reason to switch. Yeah, there are other technologies that are evolving. Can they compete against lithium? Whether the lithium bridge is 10 years, 5 years, 2 years, some of that's going to depend on, if somebody has a manufacturing breakthrough where an alternative is significantly less expensive and has significant advantages over lithium. Lithium has the problem of being harsh on the environment in those areas where it's extracted. They can overcome some of that. Like in the Salton Sea, we're seeing a lot of extraction that doesn't have those same environmental issues. So I don't know. The jury's out. We'll
All
see
right.
how it goes.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Yeah, as we mentioned, storage prices are coming down dramatically. Some of that is being pushed by Tesla at their, $1,000 price point. So we're seeing those prices drop off significantly. And who are the dominants there? Well, Enphase still a dominant when it comes to batteries. Tesla's catching up. So the reason Enphase is pretty dominant, even though it's expensive, is it's a proprietary system. If you install Enphase inverters, you need to buy an Enphase battery. There's just no two ways around it. Although that said, we've had people on these calls who have said they've found workarounds. Generac seems to be very pricey compared. This is kind of the price points there. Generac is the expensive. Tesla is the cheap one. So those are the things. And the other reasons that have changed over the years is, why are you putting in a battery? Well, in past years, there was a lot of reasons. Was backup power. Then we started seeing utilities that had time of day pricing. So that's the saving on utility rates becomes an issue. And then self-supply. Well, self-supply is basically when you're getting paid wholesale, but you're paying retail. Why would you sell it back to the utility? Why not just hold it and use it? If they're paying you 4 cents and you're getting charged 20 cents, why ship it back to them? Well, what we're seeing in the dark blue here this year is those three reasons are kind of balancing out. I'd say self-supply is a reaction to the fact that the utilities are all shifting their net metering policies over towards retail wholesale. The backup power, still the grid's as unreliable as ever, and savings on rates, time of day pricing. So those are the reasons. But what we do see here is a dramatic increase in adoption, in the attachment of solar, all the way up approaching 40% of the systems now having some form of storage attached to them. And just 2 years ago, it was 10%. So that's dramatic. And the reason for that primarily is price, right? When the price comes down dramatically, people will adopt it. There are some other reasons like, self-consumption and time of day pricing and all of that stuff. But really, they're secondary issues. As the price of storage comes down, more and more people will adopt it. It's really a nice alternative if you can afford it. And now people are finding they can afford it. And I think what we're starting to see, we talk about the term grid parity. When solar was the same as paying your electric bill, the cost of your solar system is the same as paying your electric bill. That's called grid parity. Well, it sounds great, but it's like a 25-year system. It's going to take you 25 years to pay it off. That's when you hit grid parity. So not a huge amount of adoption, but it does begin to make sense as an investment. If you can get a 4 or 5, 7, 8, 10% return on your investment guaranteed, that's going to be great. Well, right now we're reaching a place where solar plus storage is hitting grid parity. At that point, we see a dramatic increase in adoption of solar. And I think the repercussion when it comes to the utility is solar plus storage is now the same cost as being connected to the grid. If you as a utility make it difficult for me to connect to the grid through your pricing, through your service, through your reliability, through any of these factors that you're throwing obstacles in the way, I don't need you. I'll just install my system. I'll go stand alone. And I think we're going to see a large trend here over the coming years of a greater proportion of of people installing solar just opting to go independent of the utility until the utility comes up with or realizes they're not in the power distribution business anymore. They're in the connected energy business, and they start having products that feed into that shared energy connectivity. And we'll have to see what that is. Al, you'll be our final question, then we'll have to jump off.
Yeah, this would be a good program for a future date. I think you have touched on this in the past, though, is it makes a whole lot more sense to me if you want to have battery backup just for backup purposes. Just buy an old Nissan Leaf with vehicle to home and use that much larger battery. And some of these new trucks have huge batteries.
Yeah.
You could power your house for weeks.
There you go. You can have an Appalachian backup system. Just put it on blocks in your front yard and you're all set.
That's it.
So
that's it.
There you are.
But how close to reality is vehicle to home?
Very close, very close. The standards were just released the end of last year. So now what we need, the technology already exists of using your automobile, your electric vehicle battery as a backup for your home. The question is now we just need protocols that are adopted by all of the manufacturers, so that it does not affect your warranty issues, things of that nature. But we're close. As you said, there are already some proprietary solutions like the F-150 Lightning, but those are proprietary. Now we just need general standardization of this, and very, very soon we're going to be in the vehicle to home, vehicle to business, vehicle to grid, all of that. That's going to change this industry dramatically. Okay, well, I'm going to cut it off here, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks for your attention. Bye-bye.